Hey everyone, welcome to Lauren De Laguna. Thank you so much for coming in. I am honored to have with us Brett Johnson. Brett Johnson is a unbelievable character in the world of crypto and cyber crimes and in American culture. And I don't want to give too much of an intro. I usually give a longer intro, but he has such an interesting past and so much to say that I think I'm just going to bring him on. So, Brett, how are you?
Lauren, I'm good. How are you?
Good. I love your personality. So bombastic.
Well, never do anything small. That's breaking the law. That's doing things on the good guy's side. Never go small. Always go big.
Yeah, and you have a show, right?
I do. I've got the Brett Johnson Show on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. We're coming back to YouTube in the next couple of 3 weeks. I'll give you a little secret. I've ordered a co-host for my show. Yes. So my co-host, we were having dinner, and I had ordered this prop of one of the Gremlins from the Gremlin movies, and I was going to have him on my show, and kind of nodding along and everything. And my oldest stepson, he's like, "Well, you should get a puppet of yourself."
That'd be hysterical.
So that's my co-host. I've ordered a puppet, a mini me.
What kind? Is it like a hand puppet, or
it looks just like a Muppet of Brett Johnson?
That's hysterical.
That's what I'm going to do.
Oh my gosh. Well, if you want to bring up any pictures of something, so if you want to send a picture of that to Henry, then we can bring that onto the show at any time.
I will certainly do that. As soon as I mean, it won't be tonight.
Okay, all right. We can put it in our community. Yeah, that's so cool. So, if you were to describe yourself, like if you were to try to describe Brett Johnson and who you were in a single sentence, how would you do that?
Oh, Lauren, you can't do it in one sentence. I will say this. I will say the United States Secret Service called me the original internet godfather. And the way I got the title was committing 39 felonies because 38 just isn't enough. I was on the United States Most Wanted list. I escaped from prison. Yes, I did. And I built and ran the first organized cybercrime community called Shadow Crew. It was a precursor of today's darknet, and darknet markets laid the foundation for the way modern cybercrime channels operate today. Those 39 felonies, well, they had to do with refining modern financial cybercrime as we know it. So, original internet godfather, father of modern cybercrime, nothing to be proud of, but that is who I am. Usually the story ends with me going to prison, and I did. But I was very fortunate through the help of my wife, my sister, and then finally the FBI. I was given the opportunity to turn my life around, and I did. Today, I'm a spokesperson for AARP. I'm the first chief criminal officer on the planet. I travel across the world to speak, consult with the largest companies, and I take it very seriously about protecting businesses and consumers from that type of person that I used to be.
When did you meet your wife along the path?
Oh, now there's a story that I don't get to tell much. So I had gotten out of prison in 2011, and I was I wanted to be a legal guy when I got out of prison, but you're released from prison with the exact same tools with which you enter. And I couldn't get a job. I was under 3 years probation, so I couldn't even touch a computer. I had some job offers initially from KnowBe4, from a couple of payment processing companies, couldn't take them. And
touch a computer like it was part of your probation?
It was. So most cyber criminals, you have a limit. The first 3 years, you're either under 3 or 5 years supervised release, and that means you cannot touch a computer. You have to tell every prospective employer what your history is, things like that. So I couldn't get a job, could not, and it got to the point that I was bumming money from my dad and my sister. I was on food stamps. I had a roommate that was taking care of half of the rent for the apartment that I was in. And they tell you when you leave prison, they were like, "Hey, find you something you care about and a job, and you won't recidivate." Well, I cared about a cat. I had a little pet cat that I was absolutely crazy about and couldn't get a job. But I got to the point where I didn't have enough money to. I didn't have any money. I didn't have enough money to buy toilet paper. And so what happened is I went to the dollar store not shoplift. I went to the dollar store, bought the cat some food. On the way out, they had a kiosk there, toilet paper, and I shoplifted toilet paper. And along this, that was the first crime I committed when I got out. When that happened, shortly after that, I met my wife now, Michelle. I'd had a friend sign me on for one of these online dating sites. And Michelle, she messages me one day, and I'm giving the classic prison pose. You know, it's like you got your arms crossed, like. And she sends me a message like, "Why aren't you smiling?" And my response was, "That is my happy face." So we started talking, and then we agreed to meet on a beach in Destin, Florida. That's where I was down in the Panhandle of Florida. So we met in Destin, and 10 minutes into the conversation, she looks at me and she's like, "So what's the worst thing that you've ever done?" And I looked at her and said, "Well, I just got out of federal prison." And she's like, "No, what's the worst thing?" And I'm like, "I just got out of federal prison."
Oh, no.
So I told her everything at that point, and we had dinner that night. I looked at her after we got through with the date, and I was like, "Look, I would like to continue seeing you. You'll go home and look me up." And she's like, "No, I won't." And I was like, "Yes, you will." So she went home. She looked me up, and
Yeah.
I was very fortunate that she wanted to keep seeing me, and that's my wife now, Michelle. That's those three things. When the people that I've seen that get out of prison, I've not seen anybody yet that doesn't want to turn their life around. But just
Nobody.
because, I mean, everybody wants to turn their life around when they get out of prison. They want to go around and be legal and be a productive citizen, things like that. But the problem is that unless you have that support group that helps you along with that, the likelihood of that happening is almost zero. You have to get a job. You have to, and it's almost impossible to get a job, especially if you're a financial cyber criminal. So you have to get a job. You have to have people that support you and care for you, and that you can talk to and open up to, and things like that. And I've been very fortunate since my release from prison. I've been very fortunate that I've had those people. Very grateful for that. But yeah, that's my wife, Michelle. She's outstanding. My sister Denise, Denise lent into that turnaround for me as well. She had disowned me for a period of time, then came back in my life, and that's what really caused me to realize that the only person that put me in prison was me. And then finally, the FBI. I reached out to a guy named Keith Malarski. He's kind of this FBI super cop. He's retired now, but sent him a message on LinkedIn of all things. I was like, "Hey, respect everything you did. By the way, I'd like to be legal." And the dude, he took me in under his wing within 2 hours, sent me some messages, gives me references, pointers, everything else, does that to this day. Like I said, I lead a very blessed life. I truly do. I'm not sure I deserve it, but I'm damn grateful to have it.
What do you think it was that allowed you to attract those people? Because so many people out of prison, they're not able to attract that support system. And you were able to get your sister back into your life. You were able to attract Michelle. Was there something that was pushing you forward to try to do better? What was it?
Yeah, for me, I think I went through this thing while I was in prison. I went through RDAP, the Residential Drug Abuse Program. I've not used drugs, but I lied to get into the program, and I'm very fortunate that I did, because it's not about drug abuse. It's about cognitive behavioral therapy. So it teaches you that your thoughts determine your feelings determine your actions. So if you change your thought process down the line, your actions will change as a result. And I attribute a lot of it to that 9-month program that I went through of, you change your thought process. If the things that are not working for you, and you continue making the same choices and decisions, maybe you're having the wrong thought process to begin with. So I think that with me, it's being able to step aside from that cognitive dissonance that I had for all those years, being more open, being more humble. I've always had a problem with humility and my ego and things like that, but being more open, having gratitude for the things that's given to me. And today, I don't know how else to say it other than to just say it. I think that my main goals today are to know who I am and why I do the things I do, in the past and present as well. So I want to know who I am, but I also want to help people and not hurt people. And I think that, for me, I think that's the reason that I'm here, and maybe the reason that we're all here at the end of the day. So who knows?
So you want to help people now,
Mhm.
but in the past you hurt people.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I know your story and I know you've gone through it a lot, but can you talk about, your upbringing and what led you to the life of crime that you had?
Sure. We'll dive into that. So my
I
first
know I know you're talking about it all. You've done so many interviews and you're so great at it. It's how
no,
many interviews have you done out of curiosity?
way too many. I mean, I don't know, a lot. I'm on this last week's episode of Darknet Diaries. It's a 2-part episode. I've been on the Lex Friedman show, Megyn Kelly's show. I've been on I've been in all the news and everything else like that. Like I said, I'm very fortunate. What you mentioned about my life of crime, it would take a long time to go into that, but we'll go into some of that. My life of crime began when I was 10 years old. Shoplifting food for me and my sister. My mom was I hesitate to call my mom a fraudster, but my mom was not a good person. My mom is not a good person. She's still alive, but she almost typifies this Eastern Kentucky mentality of hustles and scams and frauds, things like that. This is a woman who at one point she steals a 108,000-pound Caterpillar dozer. Another point, she takes a slip and fall in a convenience store, tries to sue the owner. We had a neighbor she acted as a pimp for. I grew up in that type of environment. So my first crime was shoplifting food for me and my sister. And from that instant, it continued on from there. I'm the guy that just didn't quit. And I'm adamant about saying that my childhood did not result in my choices as an adult. My choices are mine. I chose to victimize people. But when you're a child, you can't help that. You're going to do what the adults in your circle are doing. So I grew up knowing how to traffic drugs, breaking and entering, charity fraud, insurance fraud for stealing cars, faking accidents, burning homes for cash, illegally strip mining coal, document fraud, disaster fraud. You name it, I grew up knowing how to do those things until I branched off on my own and went into internet crime. But even before that, I mean, I faked a car accident to get the money to get married in the mid 90s. Moved from Hazard, Kentucky to Lexington, Kentucky, and continued to break the law. I mean, I would set up little shell corporations and commit frauds under those corporations. I would do some check kiting in the area. At one point, I set up my own charity and started ripping people off in the area there and got caught doing that, served 3 months in a county jail until finally I found eBay. So my first online crime, found eBay, liked eBay a lot, didn't really know how to make money on eBay. And Bill O'Reilly gave me a lot of inspiration in my early days as a criminal. So he was hosting Inside Edition, and they were talking about Beanie Babies, and the one they were profiling was Peanut the Royal Blue Elephant, selling for $1,500. I'm sitting there watching like, shit, I need to find me a Peanut. Skip class the next day, go around to all the little shops looking for the little thing. Takes me about 3 hours to figure out, well, idiot, he's not in the stores. He's on eBay for $1,500. But they had these little gray ones, exactly the same, just a different color. Had these little gray Beanie Baby elephants for $8. Bought one of those for $8. Stopped by the grocery store on the way home, picked up a pack of blue Rit dye. Went home, tried to dye the little guy. Found out pretty quick they're made out of polyester. They don't really hold dye. Get them out of the bath, look like they've got the mange. That's the that's the first crime I committed online. Ripped a lady off with $1,500 on that. Found a picture of a real one. She wins the bid. As soon as she wins the bid, I send her a message to put her on the defensive. I don't want to be on the defensive on any type of scam or social engineering that I'm trying to pull. So my message was, hey, congratulations, you win the bid. By the way, we've not ever done any business before. I don't even know if I can trust you. What I need you to do is send me a U.S. postal money order. Once I get that, it's issued by the government, protects you, protects me. I get that. I'll send your animal to you. She did that, and I ripped her off. And that's the first crime I committed online, but I got away with it, and I kept going. And as I kept going, I got better at understanding
so you sent her the poorly dyed one?
I sent her the poorly dyed one. Immediately got a phone call. This is not what I ordered. My response was, lady, you ordered a blue elephant. I sent you a blue ish elephant. And what you find out is, and this it's still the same today, whether you're an individual or an organization, if you delay a victim long enough, a lot of them, they get exasperated, they throw their hands in the air, walk away, you don't hear from them again, and none of them complain to law enforcement. First lesson of cybercrime. So that's the first crime I committed. I started doing little scams and hustles like that until I got involved with mod chips and then programming satellite DSS cards. The RCA systems, the 18-inch RCA satellite systems, you can pull the card out of it, program it, turn on all the channels. Started doing that, ripping a lot of people off on not delivering product. Got worried about how much money was coming in. Thought I was going to be looked at for money laundering. Figured the best thing I could do is get a fake driver's license, use that to open up a bank account, launder the money through that, cash out at the ATM. No idea where to get a fake ID. So I got online, looked around, thought I found a guy, sent him $200, sent him my picture, and the dude rips me off. And yeah, that's what you call karma right there. But I got pissed. I got really pissed.
No idea for a new cybercrime?
I know, right? Right. But the thing is I still needed the fake ID. So the end result of that was shadowcrew.com. If you look at modern cybercrime, there are 3 sites. There's Shadow Crew, Counterfeit Library, and then finally Carter Planet. I built and ran both Counterfeit Library and Shadow Crew. Before that, and here's what's kind of interesting on cybercrime. It's never a single attacker which seeks to victimize you. It's always a group of individuals. And the reason for that is there's 3 necessities to online crime. You have to gather data. So that's the PII, the credentials, the logins. It's any tools that are needed, like spoofed phone calls, proxies, anything else like that. So you gather data, you commit a crime, and then finally you cash that out. What you see in these environments is that one single attacker, one criminal, can't do all 3 things. He can do one, sometimes 2, but rarely all 3. And that's why you have these online forums, the dark net, for places like that. They exist so those criminals can network with each other. Before Shadow Crew, that we didn't have an area that was a possibility. You had IRC, Internet Relay Chat, kind of a rolling chat board where you had no idea who you were talking to, if you could trust them, if they had a product, if they had it, or if they're just going to rip you off because everyone there was a crook. Shadow Crew gave a trust mechanism that criminals could use.
And the trusted criminal source.
So if you think about it, and really the physical mafia groups and gangs are no different. You have to be able to trust your criminal associates. There's a reason that the cartels are as ruthless as they are. So that if you screw over a cartel, they're going to kill you, your family, your associates, your dog. They're going to wipe everything out. And that fear is what enforces trust. Well, you can't do that in an online environment. So how do you establish trust in an online criminal environment? Well, you have vouching systems, you have review systems, you have escrow systems, all these things working together that more or less helps establish who that individual is that you're working with when you don't know what they look like, will never meet, don't know each other's real name. Shadow Crew makes the front cover of Forbes, August 2004. Who's stealing your identity?
Start Shadow Crew.
Do what now?
What year did you start Shadow Crew?
Counterfeit Library was the first. Counterfeit Library was 97, 98. By 2000, we're into Shadow Crew. Shadow Crew runs from either 2000 or 2001 until 2004. We make the front cover of Forbes August of 2004, October 26, 2004. United States Secret Service arrest 33 people, 6 countries, 6 hours. I'm the only guy publicly mentioned as getting away. The types of crimes that I was involved with Shadow Crew. Any and every type of financial and identity theft you could possibly imagine. That's the easiest way to put it. Not only that, but helping to implement, refine, establish what that should look like in an online environment. So we're talking account takeovers, credit card theft, phishing schemes. I'm the reason, for example, that your tax returns are delayed every year. I'm the guy who created tax return identity theft, fraudulent bank accounts, money laundering. I mean, you name it. Shadow Crew is responsible for that.
Do you think you screwed over more individuals or companies or municipalities?
I stole more money from the United States government than anyone else.
Okay.
That being said, it doesn't matter which vertical that you're victimizing, it all bleeds down to the consumers. So the actions, the crimes that I was committing, like for example with tax return identity theft, that's reflected still today with people having their returns delayed for sometimes months on end. All right, so the number of victims out there are, I mean, you can't put a real number on that at all, and you can't put a number on the damage that was done. Just to give you some stories about people that I victimized. Excuse me. There was a lady. She was a single mom that was selling a silver coin collection on eBay to put a roof on her house for her and her kids. I stole that from her. Um, there was a guy. I remember this one guy. I think I sold him a camera that didn't exist, and I'm pretty sure that's what it was. He sent me a note after he realized he had been scammed. He sent me a note saying that I guess you needed the money more than I did. So there was that. There was, I mean, the number of victims and the types of damage that was done. It's hard to when you start telling these stories, it almost feels like I'm minimizing it. All right, but I mean, there's no redeeming qualities whatsoever to being a criminal. None. It's not a Robin Hood or a Jesse James. Those people never existed like that. All right. I was a completely despicable character. I lied to everyone that I knew, lied to myself. I victimized and stole from people I knew, people I didn't know. I used everyone that I possibly could.
Do you have empathy for them now? And did you have empathy for them then?
I would say I do now. I would say then, no. I'm very fortunate with the work that I do today that, I get to hear all these different theories and studies and everything like that. And one thing that really hits with me is this thing called Creasy's fraud triangle. The ACFE teaches this, and it's for insider fraud to happen, you have to have opportunity, pressure, and then justification. And to me, that justification is first and foremost with criminal acts. Most criminals are not sociopaths. They justify their actions, and I was no different with that. I spent an entire lifetime trying to justify my actions. I did it for my sister. I did it for my wife. I did it for my stripper girlfriend. It took me until I was 2 years behind the fence to realize that no, I did it because I chose to. So I was always looking for that justification. And I believe that justification. When Shadow Crew gets busted, I get picked up 4 months later. Secret Service gives me a job at that point. I continue to break the law from inside Secret Service offices for the next 10 months until they find out about it. Yeah. That's this idiot right here. Continue to break the law from inside the offices with them in the room with me for the next 10 months until they find out about it. At which point I take off on a cross-country crime spree. The day I went on that cross-country crime spree, this New York Times writer by the name of Tom Zeller, he comes down and he's interviewing me. He had been interviewing me while I was working for the Secret Service. And he asked me, the last question of the day, he asked me, he's like, why did you do it all? And I looked at him and I said, Tom, I did it all for Elizabeth. Elizabeth was my stripper fiance at that point. And Tom looked at me, and his exact words, and I'll never forget it, his exact words were, GD, Brett, at some point, you've got to accept responsibility. And at that point, I had no idea what that man was talking about, because to me, I had convinced myself, well, I did it all for her. And it took me going to prison. It took my sister disowning me, just hitting that rock bottom to come to terms with no, I put myself in prison. I didn't have to do this. Crime is always a choice. I made an active decision to victimize other people.
Do you think that cognitive behavioral therapy that you learned in that program for the drug addicts was also part of the learning empathy and the learning to take responsibility for your actions, or was it just hitting the rock bottom?
No. I think that CBT was an absolute necessity. Absolute necessity. And the thing is that, hey, you can go through the program and it won't do you any good. But if you decide to try to start working that program, it starts hitting you all of a sudden. You have a bad day and you wake up or maybe you got fired from the job or whatever. And if you can just change the thought processes to try to make it a positive experience instead of a negative one, everything follows from there. And to this day, I quote parts of that CBT program. I think that everyone could really benefit from that type of cognitive behavioral therapy. I really do. It was life-changing for me.
Yeah, that's great. Do you know if they offer this in most prisons or no?
So to get it in federal prison, most prisons, in federal prison, it's offered, but you have to be transferred to a federal prison that offers it. Now, the way that I got arrested. I made the United States Most Wanted list. I went to Disney World, got arrested at Disney World. They throw me in the Orange County jail. Yeah, I went to Disney World. They throw me in the Orange County jail, and this guy kind of takes me in under his wing, and he's like, hey, the only time you get off in federal prison is the drug program. And I'm like, I don't use drugs. And he's like, well, you can find a drug problem, can't you? And I'm like, I can find a drug problem. So I start complaining. They give me this thing called diesel therapy, where you stop at every single county jail from Orlando back to Columbia, South Carolina. It took like 2 weeks to get back to Columbia. So at every county jail I stopped at, I told the guards there and on the intake, I'm a cocaine, alcohol. So I had a history of that coming into court. My attorney gets a psychological evaluation for me. So the psychologist comes into the county jail, 4-hour interview. 2 hours into it, he looks at me. He's like, so do you use any type of drugs? And I'm like, yeah. Well, what do you use? Cocaine, smoke or snort? Snort. How much? An 8-ball a day. And he looks at me and he says, that's a lot. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, do you have any trouble out of that? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, what? And I was like, well, I can't get an erection. And no kidding, I got that from the movie Boogie Nights. So that end scene, I got that from that. So I'm looking at the psychologist. He's looking at me. And finally, I'm like, is that right? And he looks at me and he's like, it could happen. Is it still happening now? And I was like, no, not that I want it to be fixed right now. So that makes it into my pre-sentence report. And and the day of my sentencing, the prosecutor, he's standing up. He's like, oh, it was a circus. It was. Prosecutor's literally yelling in court. He's like, Johnson has manipulated the Secret Service, the prosecutor, and you today, Your Honor. We insist on the upper limits of the guidelines. Judge looks at me and she's like, I agree, 75 months. I'd already been telling everybody if I got any more than 60, I was going to release myself. So I looked at my lawyer and I was like, can you get the drug program for me? He's like, I don't know. I'll ask. He stands up. Judge, will you order the drug program for Mr. Johnson? She says no, but I'll recommend he gets evaluated for it. I'm like, what does that mean? My lawyer's like, you're probably not going to get it. And again, it's weird what you remember and stuff like this. My exact words were, how soon can you get me to the camp? And he was like, pretty soon if you don't appeal. And I'm like, F the appeal, get me to the camp. I'll take it from there. So he looks at me like I'm the biggest idiot in the world. 6 weeks later, I'm at the camp. I'm at the camp for 6 weeks, and then I escape. They use the exact. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
How did you escape?
I wish I could say it was a helicopter or a gunfight or something like that. It's nothing romantic. I mean, what it was, my dad. I hadn't really had a conversation with my dad for 20 years. He shows up at my sentencing, stands up, and he tells the judge that he wants to make sure I get a good start when I get out, so I can live with him when I get out of prison. He starts visiting me at the prison. About the third visit in, he looks at me. He's like, I've been reading about you online. I'm like, yeah. He's like, yeah. He's like, that's a lot of money you made. I'm like, yeah. He's like, do you think you could teach somebody how to do that? So I used to lie about it and say that I thought my dad was back in my life. And the truth of the matter was, I think that my dad, he only knew me through that lens of my mother. So I think he was just trying to have communication with me. And I manipulated and used the man to help me escape. He had $4,000 cash to his name. I had him drop that off outside of the fence one day with a change of clothes, a cell phone, and a driver's license. And I escaped. I was on the run for 3 to 4 weeks. U.S. Marshals were canvassing a 3-state area at that point in time, and they found me and arrested me. And the end result of all of that is I got another 15 months in prison, and I got the drug program ordered. And looking back now, I really think if I hadn't went through that drug program, I'd probably be back in prison. I mean, that the CBT stuff was instrumental, truly
Where
was.
were you living when you were escaped?
Where was I living when I escaped? So I'm from Eastern Kentucky, a place called Hazard. So all those floods that happened over the summer, that epicenter is my hometown. As I committed more crime, I migrated south until I hit Charleston, South Carolina. Liked Charleston a lot. Got arrested in Charleston. So when the escape, everything was out of South Carolina. All the charges were at that point. When I was released to Florida. Currently, I'm in Birmingham, Alabama.
Were you just like living homeless or car?
Well, I mean, when I escaped, I was holed up in a hotel. When I was on the run from, when I was the United States Most Wanted, I was stealing about $160,000 cash a week. So I was holed up in pretty nice hotels at that point. One of the things that you find out is that most criminals, they really don't live on the low, especially if you're on the run. It costs a lot of money to be on the run. So in a 4-month span that put me on the United States Most Wanted list, I stole over $600,000. In that 4-month span, I spent about $450,000.
Were you wearing a lot of disguises?
No, I mean, I dyed my hair. At one point, I used to have hair. So I dyed my hair this flaming red because, why not? So other than I still can't. I still can't believe that. I remember the U.S. Marshal. He got me and he was looking at that hair and he's like, "What happened to your hair, man?" And I was like, "Well, I'm trying to hide." And he was like, "I'm like, all right,
What age did your dad leave your life, and before he came back in?
Right at 10 or 11 years old. My mom.
So when you started stealing?
Yeah. So when I started stealing, so what happens is my dad, I get my criminal mindset from my mother. My father, I get this fear of being abandoned. He was always scared that the people that he loved were going to leave. So I get both of those and you mix them together and you get Brett Johnson. What happened is dad was, he came from a really good family. And, looking back now, if you've never been in an abusive relationship, it's kind of like that frog in water. You don't know that it's happening until you're already cooked. So that was pretty much my father. He became the enabler. If my mom wanted to commit a crime, he wouldn't step in the way. If she wanted to abuse someone, he wouldn't stop it. And she was abusive, not just physical, but mostly mental, verbal negligence. Finally, she leaves my dad. She lied to me and my sister and my dad. My great grandfather had died. And my mom tells my dad and me and Denise that we're going to go up to the funeral in Kentucky to just go to that funeral. And I don't see my dad again for several years. She just lied to us all. She was leaving him at that point, and nobody knew it but her. So my dad was one of these people that are kind of out of sight, out of mind. So he didn't. He was not very good about reaching out or trying to establish contact, anything else like that. So yeah, my life of crime began shortly after that. We moved to Kentucky. My mom kept up those partying ways. She'd sometimes be gone for days at a time. I was the kid that used to post up at the window to see if she was driving down the street, or I'd walk out in the driveway, see if she was driving home. Denise was just the kid who was angry all the time. So we didn't have any food in the house one day. Denise walks in. She's got this pack of pork chops in her hand. And I'm like, "Where'd you get that?" And she's like, "I stole it." And I'm like, "Show me how you did that." So she shows me how she stuffs food down her pants. And I'm like, "Shit, that's the best idea ever." So we start stealing food, look across the way, and Kmart's over there. And it becomes this perverted form of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Books, games, jewelry, music, steal everything. Mom comes home, sees everything has been stolen, asks where it came from. I'm the kid that stands up at 10. "We found it." She's like, "No, you didn't find that." Denise is the kid who stands up just pissed off, half proud, half angry. "We stole it." My mom looks at my sister. "Show me how you did that." And she joins us. Not only does she join us, but she goes to get her mother to join us as well. So that's my first crime. And again, I'll for any listeners out there, when you're a child, you can't help that. But I had the choice as an adult to not do that. It's not like I'm an idiot. All right, I'm very bright. My sister, for example, she went through the same background that I went through. She goes off to be a great teacher, a great parent, great human being. Me, I'm the kid that just kept on going. And as I got older, I got more involved in those types of scams and hustles that not only my mom, but everyone on that side of the family was involved in until finally you get this guy you're talking to today, this cybercrime guy.
Yeah, I mean, cybercrimes are super lucrative, though.
Yeah.
When you see modern day cybercrimes, are they pretty obvious to you now at being the birth father of them? Like this FTX thing, was that, did you
Well,
see that coming like a mile away, or how?
what's amazing to me with FTX is the media is taking it really easy on him. They really
Right.
are. I mean,
But
and
he's doing an interview with somebody.
I know, and you look at it. So he had the back door. I think Reuters reported on that. The back door to cook the books. He was doing this Ponzi scam technique between Alameda Research and FTX. He was obviously lying to everyone across the board, and now it's you see the Wall Street Journal that's coming out with articles of his plan to save the world went up in flames. Well, no, he was a fraudster to begin with. The thing that's interesting to me with frauds like that is I don't really believe that he started out with the idea that he was going to commit a crime. So, and if you think about it, most cyber criminals, like a career cyber criminal, and now there are millions of them spread across the planet, but a career cyber criminal, we start from ground zero and make sure all of our ducks are in a row. That we have our operational security, that we're anonymous, that we have all the tools and everything that we need, any stolen PII, credentials, what have you. And then we attack, we test, we attack, withdraw funds. Most people don't do it like that. And that's typically how someone is caught. You take SBF, Friedman, or whatever, Sam Bankman Fried, or whatever his name is. You take him. I don't think that he really planned on breaking the law to begin with. But I think that it dovetailed into that pretty quickly. Once you start hitting crypto winter, your figures are not going to match as they should. So you've got to start cooking some books. But as I say that, you have to also realize that he had that back door the entire time that Reuters was talking about. So was it pre-planned? I don't know. I think that my view of cyber criminals these days, when I was a cyber criminal, you had to understand every single dynamic of the crime that you were committing. Everything. You had to understand the security of the target. You had to understand your operational security, how to remain anonymous. You had to know how to launder money. You had to know everything across the board. These days, the sophistication is not in the criminal, it's in the platform itself. You have cybercrime as a service these days. So most products and services are off the shelf. Criminal can come in, it's basically plug and play. Someone comes in, they want to make money, they buy an off-the-shelf service, they buy a tutorial, they take a live instruction class, what have you, and it will teach you or train you and provide everything that you need to be successful at that one specific type of crime. That's the way cybercrime is going right now, is the dumbing down. That's a nice term for it. The dumbing down of cyber criminals, from those sophisticated players into basically the idiots that are out there.
Well, when you watch him, you feel like he's a dunce. And when you watch that video of him and he explains how he made his first billion or whatever, you just kind of feel like, do you feel like he's a pawn? Do you think there's someone smarter behind FTX who wanted to use FTX for the funding of Ukraine, going back to Act Blue? Or do you think he really just is an idiot, a useful idiot that wrong place, wrong time?
Well, I think that he's definitely going to be that useful idiot for a lot of different organizations and governments by the end of it. I absolutely believe that. I don't think that what you see is, in order to be successful at crime, it really boils down to willingness. What are you willing to do? All right. Most people would not ever be willing to do anything that Sam Freed did. All right. Ever. But he was. Now that it doesn't take a genius to do this stuff. You just have to be willing to try it. All right. So and as long as the numbers were going up in the crypto world, nobody was ever going to be the wiser. The problem was the numbers started to go down all of a sudden. So that becomes an issue. I think that's an interesting question. I think that with FTX, that will absolutely be used for a springboard for regulation. I don't see any way that it's not, and I think that we're going to have a lot of overreach on regulation. I'm sure you've seen the interviews, or the House sessions and everything, where you've got the government people with the blank faces that have no idea what the hell they're talking about, and you got the aide that's whispering in their ear trying to explain it. They're like, those are the idiots that are going to make regulations for us. So we are doomed.
Yeah, our legislation is old and our technology is new,
Yeah.
and it's hard. Yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah.
In the legal world, when judges have to make decisions on tech regulation, for instance, and they barely know how to operate their own iPhone,
It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the problem we've got with privacy. We've got that with crypto. We've got our country's got a lot of problems with tech, privacy, and how to navigate these things, because the people who are in charge have no clue what any of that is.
Someone is asking, with that much money involved, how did they not follow the money? So how were they not? Yeah.
Well, again, with Sam Freed, he had that back door that allowed him to cook the books, so he could adjust those figures so nothing looked out of turn whatsoever. At the same time, understand that with FTX, it's not just FTX and Alameda. It's 156 other companies that are all under that FTX umbrella. So it's untelling how big this fraud extends. Not only that, but the news came out just the other day that FTX had bought into a bank in rural Iowa or some crap like that. That bank only had 3 employees. They gave $11.5 million in funding to that bank. The bank changed its name to Moonstone Capital or some crap like that. And the question is first, how on earth did a crypto company buy a bank?
Right.
That should have never happened. Never happened.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and then why? Are you laundering money through there? What are you doing through there? So we've got, I think there's several reasons that Sam Freed has not been arrested yet. Number one is it's going to be a very complicated case. Number two is he's given a lot of money to a lot of people. He's done a lot of virtue signaling. And I think that people are taking that seriously. I mean, we've not seen any on either side of the political fence. We've not seen anyone say, I'm going to give back this fraudulent money that Sam Freed sent me. So.
That is true. That is true. Yeah. I'd like for it's hard because it's when politicians get their money, they almost immediately spend it on campaign ads.
Right.
So they already spent that money on the ads for the midterms that had already come and gone. So it's like, do you feel like this has only been exposed after the midterms for a reason? Do you think that the government had known about this issue for a while but allowed it to go on?
Well, I mean, the flags were there, right? I mean, back in June, we had a group that tried to tell, was it Bloomberg? Was Bloomberg. They tried to tell Bloomberg that, hey, there's problems at FTX. And Bloomberg said, hey, we don't want to hear it. It's bad for business. I mean, that's a problem. That's a problem. There was an article out today or yesterday, there was an article out talking about how, because Sam Freed is no longer giving money to media, how some of these media are in a black hole all of a sudden. Where's our funding coming from? So you get someone that's spread that kind of money around, and you really don't want to hammer that guy. And that's a big issue, because this crypto problem is way past just FTX. I mean, how big does this go? I mean, we've got you had Binance the other day that they showed they show their proof of reserves, then they turn right back around and they move out 2.5 billion within 24 hours of showing that. Then yesterday they do the Merkle tree thing, and fortunately there were some other CEOs, like the CEO of Kraken, calls them out. Hey, that doesn't mean a damn thing. Where's the deficits? So
Right.
it's
Do you think most cryptocurrencies are basically a scam?
I do think that most are a scam. I do think
Okay.
that. Now that doesn't mean, the problem is that the blockchain can be trusted. All right.
Okay.
There's not a doubt about that. The blockchain itself can be trusted. The problem is with CeFi, that centralized exchange type setup, they take the trust that's established with the blockchain and try to apply it to that centralized exchange. And it doesn't equate like that. Just because you trust one element of that vertical doesn't mean that all the other elements are trusted as well. So I think that, if we can get set up where we're doing DeFi, I think that's a much better idea. The question is whether that's going to happen or not. It's hard to go into a store and buy bread with Cardano or Tron or anything else like that. So
Right.
we have to get that figured out, because you can absolutely be, crypto rich and cash poor. And if you're cash poor, it's not really doing you any good at all. I think
So
that
does this have anything to do with like the centralized digital banking currencies, or you know what I'm do you know what I'm trying
I
to
know
say?
what you're talking about. And, it's been said before, and it's been said for a few years, that as soon as the banks decide to come out with their own centralized tokens,
Right.
that crypto dies. And to an extent, I believe that. All right, to an extent. Now, where I don't believe that is this entire gray and black market economy that every country in the world has. You're not going to use those centralized bank tokens to make those types of transactions. You're not going to buy your pot like that. You're not going to buy your, credit card data like that or anything else. You're going to use something else. And that something else is Bitcoin, XMR, Zcash, something like that. So I don't think that crypto is going to die completely. I would. I was the guy that was very hopeful that crypto would be one of these things that would change the world, but it really hasn't. It hasn't.
Mm.
There's still a lot of hope for that. Like with NFT technology, things like that. There's a lot of hope that the technology changes things, but so far we've not really seen a whole lot of that yet.
Right. Is there the fear that, for instance, Canada, when they were having the trucker issue, they cut off their ability to receive Bitcoin? So is there fear of governmental influence over these digital currencies?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, if you think, we've seen India at one point come out against it. We've seen China come out against it. The more countries that come out against it, you're going to see those dips coming in place. The issue becomes, how do people get around those limits that the countries are putting into place? And you can get around them. It requires some jumping through hurdles and things like that. To me, the main issue is you've got governments that want to be able to track every single currency transaction that's around. Now, with a centralized token, you can absolutely do that. But the problem is you've got a populace that doesn't want to do that. And to my way of thinking, the populace is what's going to win out. You're always going to have some way that you're going to be able to buy your drugs, buy your illegal goods, whatever you're paying for that you don't want your wife to know about. You're going to have some way of doing that. So the idea that one centralized exchange or currency is going to dominate them all like Lord of the Rings, I don't really see that happening. I think that we're always going to have crypto to a degree. Like my Twitter feed, for example, I'm like, hey, if a criminal's not using it right now, you might want to reevaluate the tokens that you're holding. So that's my investment advice. It's not investment advice for right now.
Yeah. What do you think of? I mean, I just feel like this is so ripe for fraud. Like, it's the dollar, I understand, used to be backed by gold, and it's
Right.
no longer backed by gold. And so the idea being is it's essentially worthless. We just give an arbitrary value to it based off. So I get that. Why
The
would you
problem, the
ever?
problem, Lauren,
Yeah.
you've got, and there was a gentleman I was talking to a couple of weeks ago that made this point as well. A lot of the crypto scams target minorities. All right. So you take a minority group that somewhat downtrodden, very poor, and media, the press, scammers start talking about the amount of money that you can make in crypto. You can get out of your environment. You can be rich. You can so it's something that you want. It's something that appeals to you emotionally. For a scam to work, I have to get you to trust me, but I also have to get you to react more emotionally than logically. All right. I have to get you to do that knee jerk reaction. Well, fortunately, because of crypto and because of, I can point out all these tokens that have risen in value thousands of percent and use
Right.
that to establish trust with people. At the same time, there's not really any good places. I mean, there's some good places that you can go to get investment advice on crypto, but a lot of people get their investment advice from Reddit or they sign on to a Telegram channels and stuff like that. So you've got bots that are just pumping up these tokens all the time. At the same time, you don't have any regulation in there. So you've got predators that are out there that can steal people's money. They can do a rug pull or what have you and steal people's money and walk away without consequence. Because of that lack of regulation, because of the overall environment of crypto and things like that, it's really primed for scammers to hit that. And again, the blockchain itself is to be trusted, sure, but everything that's around the blockchain has problems. You take the social media; we've seen it time and time again. Someone takes over someone's Twitter account and sends out some fake tweets about crypto and gets people to change their wallet addresses, things like that. You see that. You see phishing schemes. You see account takeovers. Um, just the amount of problems that are going around with crypto, we absolutely have to have regulation in there. But the problem is that the regulation that I think we're going to get is ill-informed and overreaching. So
Yeah, you think like the American government should be in charge of that, or who should be in charge of the regulation?
I think that ideally, you look at it from multi-government perspective is ideally how you do that because this is a worldwide problem. You've
Mhm.
got laundering that goes on across the planet. You've got these scams that take place across the planet as well. So, to combat cybercrime, jurisdiction is a huge issue. So, what we can do if you're actually going to do things right with crypto, I think that you come in with multi governments and sit down and say, hey, this is how this works. If somebody's trying to withdraw, what have you, we're going to have these issues in place. We're going to have KYC, know your customer, in place across the board. If someone can't explain where they got the tokens from, they're not going to be able to cash them out. So yeah, you may have a couple $1 million in tokens, but if you can't get cash out of it at the end of the day, you're useless. So I think that we have to have these things in place. Until we get that proper informed regulations in there, I think we're just going to continue to kind of meander along in crypto.
So, what regulations would you like if you were in the legislature and you were able to put whatever regulations in place that you were able to? What would you write up?
Well, here's where I'm going to get trouble. Here's where I'm going to get trouble. I'm going to say something's going to piss somebody off. What I would say is we get rid of all anonymous tokens. Zcash, Monero, done. I would say KYC across the board. I would say that if you've got a transaction coming across, where is the transaction coming from? How did you get these tokens? Where are these tokens going to? Be able to show that and prove that. All right. There's way too much crime that goes on around these tokens that people are able to cash these tokens out. So you have to be able to provide some sort of mechanism to show where you got it, that it's legitimate. If you can't show that, guess what? You may have the tokens, but you're not going to be able to withdraw them. You're going to be banned across the exchanges, everything else across the board. So I think that these are the things that you need to do. The idea of the blockchain not being able, and there are some blockchains that can shut down tokens and things like that. I think that we have to get to the point where we're developing these tokens that if people are scammed, that you can recall those tokens or kill the tokens off that have been stolen. I think that's an absolute necessity. That's not been done to a large degree. That's not been done and accepted. But these are the types of things that we have to do. I think that KYC is the big one. I think that provenance of the tokens is the big one as well there. And then it doesn't matter what jurisdiction you're in, you can be prosecuted regardless. So I think we have to establish that as well.
Wouldn't killing the anonymity behind these tokens lose a lot of the appeal for many of the users, even those that aren't necessarily up to nefarious activities?
It would. It would. It absolutely would. But the problem with that is, you go on the and here's the thing. I'm not saying that everyone that uses XMR and Zcash and the like are criminals. They're not. All right. But the way cybercrime works is typically you go from Bitcoin to Monero back to Bitcoin, or you go from Monero to Bitcoin, something like that. You do that cross hopping thing like that. Because of that, you've got a lot of development on these criminal platforms that's pretty sophisticated right now. You look at some of these; it's not just financial cybercrime. You look at the child pornography sites, you look at all these the drug sites, everything else. Because they can rely on those types of anonymous payments, their platforms have become much more sophisticated over the past 5 years than they were at any point prior to that. I mean, that growth potential is really ramped up pretty big right there. You've got to be able to stop that. I'm sorry, but you've got to be able to stop that. Now, you're not going to kill out Monero. You're not. But you can make sure that if somebody's hopping from Monero into Bitcoin or anything else like that, that you see that and you can flag it at that point.
Okay.
So at that point, where did this money come from? If you can't show us where it came from, we're not cashing it out.
Yeah.
Now, I'm big on privacy. I used to not be. I'm big on privacy these days, but unfortunately, with some of these tokens, the use case is a criminal use case a lot of the time, and we can't allow that type of thing to happen. Whether it be financial cybercrime, drug trafficking, child pornography, things like that. You have to be able, if you hit those operators in the pocketbook, you're going to make a difference. Understanding that most cyber crimes are committed because of status, cash, ideology. 99% of them are cash based. So you take their ability to cash out away, they're not going to operate anymore. So that's where we have to hit these people.
Yeah, it's a little bit nerve wracking because with everything that we've gone through with COVID, we want to be able to make sure the government doesn't, intrude into our lives too much and not follow all of our interactions. I know that we've hired a bunch of new IRS agents, and we are so. It's actually really surprising to hear you say that you want to get rid of that anonymity. Would this allow it so that anyone would be able to track whatever purchase you made?
I mean, the thing is that while I support that, I don't think it's going to happen because you'll always have that black market economy. You're always going to have that. You're always going to have somebody that says, I don't want the government to know what I'm doing. And it's not just one person that has that mentality. You're going to have somebody that, maybe they're cheating on their spouse, what have you, and they don't want anyone to know what they're spending money on. Because of that need to hide those transactions, I think you're always going to have that goes on. I think that with Monero and Zcash and things like that, I think that there's that it's problematic enough that they need to be looked at. All right. Monero is extremely good at what it does. It's extremely good. It's good enough that it scares the United States government. So it's good. All right. And yeah, I like Monero, but the problem is that the first adoptees to tech like that tend to be criminals. That's the issue. And if you can't get rid of those criminal actors there, and you can't trace them, and you can't right now with Monero, if you can't trace them with that becomes a big issue all of a sudden. So we absolutely have to get that reined in. We had the one of the developers of Tornado Cash that was arrested a few months ago, things like that. I don't think I really agree with him being arrested unless he was actually actively helping to launder money, and I'm not sure that's the case. But I think that right now we're just in very difficult times as a population and as a government in trying to figure these things out. I think we're going to have some overreaches. I think we're going to make some mistakes. But I'm also kind of hopeful that it works out in the end.
How much time do you think Sam Bankman-Fried or whatever should get in prison?
A good 20
years.
Yeah.
Do you think 20 years?
Yeah.
Well,
at least 20.
How much time do you think you deserved for the crimes that you committed?
At least 20.
Okay. All right.
At least 20. Yeah, hey, I got off light. I got 7.5, and I will tell anybody I should have served more time. I was very lucky. Sam Friedman, or Sam Fried, whatever that dude's name is, Sam Bankman. How many victims did it take to pay for that $40 million mansion that he's got? All right. How many victims does he have across the planet right now? That's what you
had
go.
more or less than him?
Oh, he's got more than me. Not that we're measuring sizes of things, but it's just I don't have any sympathy for anyone that victimizes other people these days. I don't, and he certainly did. And at some point, if he didn't start out actively wanting to victimize others, it got to that point where he did. And because of that active decision on his part, the number of victims and the amount of money that was stolen, squandered away, what have you, I think that he needs a good 20 years in prison.
Fair. What do you think is the future of cybercrime? Cybercrime has developed so much over the years. What's something that we're not anticipating that's coming up in the future?
I think that the misinformation is big. These deep fakes, whether it be voices or videos, I think that's going to cause a lot of damage. You look at it, and again, I mentioned before, cybercrime is committed because of status cash ideology. But imagine one of these videos that you've got police shoot a gunman, police shoot someone that is unarmed, and the video comes out. The city explodes. You've got riots across the area, everything else like that. Then 2 days later, we find out that was a deep fake. Someone simply removed the handgun from that assailant's hand. Well, the damage is already done at that point. So you've got those types of things. You've got deep fakes that can be used with market manipulation. We've seen deep fakes that are used in the Ukraine war right now. Russia released one of Vladimir Zelensky saying that they had surrendered at one point. So I think deep fakes are very big. I think automated attacks are absolutely going to continue to ramp up. Criminals look for the easiest access that gives the largest return on their investment. So they look to automate more things over and over and over again. So we're going to see that continue to go up. The ease of which cybercrime is committed is going to continue. We continue to see, especially the past 2 years, once we got past the pandemic, it's almost as if cybercrime vendors in those marketplaces, they had a collective epiphany. And they said, hey, we've got a 98 percentile of criminals out there that are not sophisticated. Let's start building products and services that offer sophisticated tools to those unsophisticated attackers. And we're seeing that across the board right now. So we're going to continue to see that. I talked to a bank at one point, and the question was posed, and it was one of the major 9 banks in the United States. The question was posed, why haven't you guys been hit with ransomware? And they said, we'll get back to you. Came back a week later, and the answer was, well, we spend $1 billion a year on security, and we're lucky. That's a problem. If luck is part of your strategy, that's a problem. So I think that we're absolutely going to see some of these some infrastructure type of attacks that decimate things across the board.
I mean, that's also a lot of. I remember in the beginning of the Ukrainian war, we were concerned of cyber attacks in such a way as closing down the New York subway station, stuff like that. And that's what you're anticipating.
I do. I think that I absolutely think that we'll see that. I really do. If an attacker can shut down the financial infrastructure, electrical grid, water, anything else like that.
Gas pipelines, that's already happened.
Gas pipelines. There you go. Yeah. And you see what happened. You saw that gas jumped up to $7 a gallon in Virginia at one point. So, I mean, we're going to continue to see that. And while there's not been a lot of information yet about these cyber attacks costing human lives, I think we're going to get to that point as well.
Do you think it's going to be just like random actors doing most of these acts, or do you think it's going to be municipalities doing against each other?
I think that the initial sophisticated attacks, as we've seen, are nation-based attacks. That's what I think. We've seen Russia that has launched the 2 biggest attacks in cybersecurity history with NotPetya and SolarWinds. And there's been no consequences whatsoever from either one of those attacks. NotPetya targeted Ukraine. SolarWinds targeted the United States. There's been absolutely no consequences for that. which is pretty bad considering that SolarWinds was the backbone for most of the Fortune 500 companies that are out there. So it starts with nation state attacks, but the thing that you see is that 90% of all attacks use known exploits. It's not computer geniuses. It's not zero-day attacks or unknown vulnerabilities. It's typically the stuff that we know about, that we've been told about for years, that we've not done anything about, that causes that threat landscape that's out there. Because of that, yes, nation states use sophisticated tools, but you also have these financial cyber criminals out there that can hit you as well. It's just that most of them are motivated by cash. So unless there's an element of cash involved, they're really not going to attack that most of the time.
Yeah, like a lot of ransom type stuff.
A lot of ransom, a lot of business email compromise, things like that.
All right. Well, I do want to definitely give people the opportunity to ask questions too. And Henry is rifling through the chats right now, looking for questions. I appreciate you so much for your time, especially because you're sick right now. How are you feeling? How's your throat feeling?
I'll probably pass out as soon as we get through with this.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good to know. And I also, you mentioned earlier you've been on Megyn Kelly. You've been on so many big shows.
Sure.
This is such a small show. You know what?
There is no small show.
I just, so you just will come on and help anybody out who wants to talk to you?
Oh yeah. If someone wants me to come on a show, I'll absolutely come on and talk to you. Sure. Absolutely.
So
I mean, I'm not proud.
You should be. You should be really proud of all the work that you've accomplished and the life change that you've made. It's really difficult to make a life change like that. Okay, Amanda Erickson. When is he going to work for one of our security agencies to help fight these rogue nations?
Well, I do teach at Quantico when the pandemic isn't going on. So I hope that answers that.
What is your education, actually?
My education is in literature and theater. I had planned to go on to law school where no doubt I would have been just a dastardly lawyer, kind of like Better Call Saul. But I chose to venture off into cybercrime instead.
Yeah, I mean, lawyers are criminals in their own right.
Well, I mean, is there a difference, you know?
Should everyone be using VPNs? This guy is very interesting. If you ever watched Tiger King 2, he's the guy who is the investigator who investigates into the Carol Baskins killing. So
look, we're getting away from VPNs right now. Now that doesn't mean you don't use them. You can use them, absolutely. I think the big tools that you need to use is freeze your credit, monitor accounts, place alerts, use a password manager until we come up with a better solution from that. Those are the top 3. From there, institute multi-factor authentication. The idea being that you're not going to be the lowest hanging fruit on the tree. Okay. Again, most criminals are attacking for cash. That's a lowest hanging fruit attack. So if you're just up in the tree just a little bit more with those tools that I just mentioned, you're going to be much better protected.
So you don't need like LifeLock or anything like that.
You know, the thing is, if you can find a free service that takes care of those things, like Mint has a free service or some other ones that are out there as well, try those first. If not, if those don't do everything you need them to do, then by all means, pick a protection service. Make sure the protection service pulls data in real time. Make sure they've not been hit with a lot of class action lawsuits as well. A lot of these protection services, they also, a couple of years ago, we had this thing where they would scan the darknet for your information. Completely useless. All right, $8 a month, completely useless. I want to save your money right now. Everyone's information is available. All right. So you don't have to pay somebody $8 to tell you that. Everyone's information is available. That's why you have to do those things that I mentioned before. Okay.
Yeah. Should we be calling people like benverified.com and asking them to, and could you bring that comment back up, Henry? Should we be asking benverified.com and stuff to take our names off of those platforms?
Yes. Because here's what happens with Ben Verified, Spokio, and Tellius, White Pages Pro, things like that. As an attacker, what I can do is I go on robocheck.cm. I buy your social and date of birth for $3.80 is what they're selling it for right now. That's an illegal database. I buy that. Then I go over to Ben Verified for $27 a month. I can pull unlimited background checks on anyone I want to pull them on. That gives me enough data and information to get your credit report. Once I get that, I can start victimizing you. So yes, absolutely reach out to those platforms and have your information taken down. The question about Ripple versus SEC, my personal opinion, I'm not a huge fan of Ripple, but I think the SEC was trying to screw them over. I think they were trying to, had some overreach going on there. I hope that Ripple wins out and they get back to that. What were they at? $3 a pop at one point, something like that. $2.83 a piece.
Close enough to say. I'm sorry. Do you think the protection services are ones creating the issues?
I don't think that they're creating the issues, but I do think that there's an over reliance on tools like that. Understand that protection service, it's your account, it's your money, it's not their money. We as human beings, once we get a security tool, we tend to say and think to ourselves, well, we're protected. No, that doesn't mean you're protected. You still need to take that proactive stance on your own security, understand what's going on with your accounts, things like that. I think that's essential to do that. Now, a protection service, again, I would say try free ones first. If that doesn't work, use a paid one. All right. But I don't think they're creating the issue. I think that some of them are better than others. I think that we over rely on them to a huge degree. And I think that honestly, that some of them just outright lie about how good their service is.
All righty. Well, I mean, I'm always scared. Those commercials always get me. They're like, but just a click of a button, they could steal your house and they can sell your mortgage. And so they do a good job.
They do a good job. It's that FUD, right?
Right. Well, I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much. Get some rest, drink some tea. I hope you feel much better. And also, thank you so much for your time. I can't even tell you how much I appreciate you coming here. It's been such a great pleasure meeting you.
I have thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much. If you need anything, please let me know. Everyone out there, stay safe. Thank you again.
Thank you, Brett. Have a good night.
You too.
Have a good night, everyone.